What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to help out the channel, additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Additionally, you can always use that TCGplayer link in the description down below to help out the channel. Now let's get into today's Deck Tech with Saheeli. And this girl has everything you want. You play her early and then you just start blinking stuff like your Mole Drifters and your Thought Monitors and you draw a ton of cards. Now you're ramping to an Oblivion because you have a lot of cards in your hand, and we're playing a ton of artifacts to ramp us in this deck because the top end of this deck is kind of expensive but also kind of insane. We're talking throwing a Brutaclad on the battlefield and then turning all of our tokens into something like a Wormcoil Engine or a Baylor and killing everybody outright. It's an incredibly explosive deck that can do some nutty stuff, and honestly she's an insane value engine that again comes down early, gives you consistent value, and there's a ton of ways we can double up on her ability. We can do some fun Goblin Welder stuff that also generates a ton of value. Like I said, it's just an artifact value engine that also has a very consistent way to end the game in the command zone. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about how we're going to double up on this value. Virtue of Knowledge and Panaharmonicon are just going to straight up double all of our ETB triggers. Battle Mage's Bracers and Illusionist Bracers are going to be broken in the deck, doubling up on our commander's activated ability. Dal Emroth, now we can untap our commander and tap her again to get 2 activations. Determined Iteration is just going to get us a populated token copy of the thing we copied with our commander. We have Sword of Hearth and Home. This can double up on our ETBs as well in a sense. Fable of the Mirror Breaker also going to be solid. Not only do we get some early game ramp, we do have some ways to synergize with discarding cards in our graveyard as well. And then we're going to get Reflections of Kiki Jiki, just another way to double up on those ETB effects and our most busted creatures. Let's talk about those ETB effects and our most broken creatures. We have Wandering Mind. This card seems pretty busted in the deck, allowing us to dig deep and grab all our key pieces. This can get us to our card draw, this can get us to removal. Additionally, it can get us to our value pieces like Illusionist Bracers. It's going to be amazing in the deck. The Everflowing Well is another amazing piece in the deck. We're going to get some cards in our graveyard, which we want, and then we're going to get to draw 2 cards. This is going to be one of the key pieces we definitely want to loop with our Goblin Engineers just to generate an insane amount of value. Brass's Tunnel Grinder is going to be insane in the deck as well. We almost never want to flip this over. We want to sacrifice it, reanimate it, keep getting that ETB, copy it with our commander, and then we're discarding the cards we don't want and drawing into that many +1. So this is always going to be a net positive. Pretty busted. Just so you can see the value engine vision, just picture Everflowing Chalice and Brass Tunnel Grinder looping in and out of the graveyard with a Goblin Engineer. That's going to get you to all the pieces you need to end the game, and it's going to do it quickly. Thought Monitor, Mole Drifter, just solid ETBs to get us additional card draw. Solemn Simulacrum, this is pretty good with our commander because our commander does sacrifice it, so we can keep getting lands and then sacrificing Solemn to draw cards. It's going to be awesome. Ichor Wellspring and Prize Statue, another solid one we can loop with Goblin Engineer. One we're getting treasures, the other one we're getting card draw. It just works out perfectly. Cursed Mirror, we can go ahead and copy that to copy any creature on the battlefield. Additionally, it's just some solid mana. Amphin Mutineer, it's very hard to find exile effects in colors that aren't white, but boom, we've got an exile effect, so that's becoming more and more important. Contagion Engine seems pretty fun here. Well, not for our opponents, but for us. We just keep blinking this guy and giving all of our opponents negative counters. That's going to absolutely screw over any go-wide strategy, which is what this deck is kind of weak to. Urza Lord High Artificer. Now, honestly, this is kind of on the lower scale of things you want to be blinking or creating token copies with our commander, but in a pinch, this guy can net you some massive bodies, so I figured I'd include him here. Terror of the Peaks is going to be insanely broken. First of all, just having 2 Terror of the Peaks on the battlefield can end games, especially when we're doubling up on those ETBs and doubling up on our commander's activated ability. If we get 3 Terror of the Peaks and then cast a creature, that's going to be pretty rough. Baylor, this is another card that can just outright end somebody. Think about it. Okay, if someone's got 7 cards in their hand, all we have to do is create a token copy of Baylor and swing at them with the original Baylor, our token copy of the Baylor, and then that Baylor will die. So what's going to happen is that guy's going to take 10 damage from both the Baylors, and then he's going to take a 7 from the one attack trigger, and then he's going to take a 7 from the other attack trigger and 7 from the die trigger. So altogether, that guy's going to take 31 points of damage. that can end somebody. And that's without any doubling effects. That's literally with just the original Baylor and the token copy you created with your commander. If we have stuff like illusionist bracers on the battlefield, someone is actually just going to die. Worm Coil Engine, super solid, get them on the battlefield, just start creating token copies of them, they die, the lifelink's amazing, the death touch is amazing, this guy just says, hey, don't attack me, and then eventually you'll get a big enough board state to start killing your opponents. Astral Dragon is just not okay in this deck. Now you do need either a Virtue of Knowledge or Panharmonicon on the battlefield, but after that, you're going to cast your Astral Dragon, you'll get 2 ETBs, netting either 4 Panharmonicons or 4 Virtue of Knowledges, and that will leave you with a total of 5, right? 4 copies in the original. Then the very first time you create a token copy of the Astral Dragon with your commander, you're going to end up with 17 Panharmonicons or Virtue of Knowledges that are also just 3/3 dragons, because that's fair. This gets out of control very quickly and will result in you winning the game, especially if Terror of the Peaks just so happens to be on the battlefield. Mirror Battlesphere, also pretty broken. You're going to get a ton of mirror, you're going to get this Battlesphere massive, and then it's going to start doing a lot of damage to your opponent, and then it's just going to hit for a lot of damage as well. This one left alone will also result in winning the game very quickly. Cyberdrive Awakener, kind of a blue Craterhoof behemoth, right? Now all of our value pieces are just out of nowhere 4/4s, and they have flying. Another thing that's pretty good about this card is, say we only have 4 artifacts, that's only 20 damage, but again, our commander can just start creating token copies of the Cyberdrive Awakener, and that's just going to make sure we can do it every turn consistently and start killing our opponents. Moving on to the core of the deck, we have Sundial of the Infinite. This is just going to make it to where we can end the turn, and now that sacrifice ability doesn't happen. So now your Worm Coil Engine just stays a 6/6, and you get to keep all the busted things you are copying with your commander. Grinding Station can be solid. Remember, our commander does turn whatever we copy into an artifact as well. So we can just go ahead and copy a Terror of the Peaks, sack it out our end step, and then we're going to get to mill cards. Having our graveyard filled in this deck is just another way to get value, so we want that to happen. Master Transmuter is another way we can utilize that token that our commander creates, right? We create a token, it's going to leave the battlefield anyway. Now we can just use Master Transmuter to put that non-existent token into our hand, and then we get to throw an artifact from our hand onto the battlefield for free. Joyra Ageless Insight, speaking of free artifacts, this girl takes a little while to get going, but once she gets there, you're just throwing bombs onto the battlefield. Goblin Welder, Goblin Engineer, and Scrap Welder. These are all going to be very useful pieces to loop our value pieces in and out of our graveyard, right? Not only are we filling our graveyard hoping to run into something like a Mirror Battlesphere or Worm Coil Engine, that way our Goblin Welder can bring them back just by sacrificing a prize statue, but Goblin Engineer can tutor for our Brass's Tunnel Grinder and then immediately start recurring it, and we can start blinking it, doing busted things, making sure we are drawing into our value pieces that we need. And then Scrap Welder is over here sacrificing stuff like Terror of the Peaks, which is now additionally an artifact, and we're using that to reanimate all of our artifacts from our graveyard. Something to note while you're using Scrap Welder. Now, 9 times out of 10, a token has 0 CMC, but whenever we're creating token copies of something, it additionally copies the CMC. So whenever we sacrifice that Terror of the Peaks that we copied with our commander to the Scrap Welder, we can grab something of 4 CMC or less from our graveyard. Unctus is going to be solid here. Now whenever we tap our commander, we just get a free loot effect. Riddlesmith, whenever we cast an artifact spell, we get a loot effect. Faithless Looting, another solid way to get cards we want in our graveyard while getting us some card advantage. Imri, Lurker of the Lock, another solid way to recur our artifacts from the graveyard. Here's where it gets messed up. I did include the One Ring, just because I think it's hilarious that we can cast this using Imri every turn, and then spend 2 mana to create a copy of it with our commander, forcing us to sacrifice the One Ring and putting it back in our graveyard. Now, that's the least efficient way to do it, but again, all we need is our commander and Imri to make that happen, and then we just have protection from everything for the rest of the game. If you have another sack out that sacrifice artifacts, it's going to be better, but again, with Imri and our commander, boom, we have protection from everything for the rest of the game, and that's just pretty funny to me. Joyro Weatherlight Captain, whenever we cast an artifact spell or historic spell, we're going to draw a card. Jessica's Will, just for some added value, we have Windfall. Biden of Thassa is going to be solid since we are attacking with a lot of creatures. Size Master Thopterus, another sacrifice outlet while generating some 1/1 bodies. Brutaclad's going to be amazing here. Now we can take our most broken creature, create a token copy of it with our commander, and then we get to turn all of our other tokens into that creature as well. I'm doing Baylor. Baylor just sounds like a solid way to end the game, right? We get that attack trigger. As long as people have cards in their hand, people are going to die. Fabricate's going to be pretty solid in this deck. You're going to be able to grab your One Rings. You're going to be able to grab your Illusionist Bracers, your Panharmonicons. It's very flexible in this deck. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots for some protection for our commander. Underworld Breach, that way we have some more solid recursion. Let's be honest, late game, Underworld Breach is a one card, you win the game in this deck. All you need is something like a Windfall, Brass's Tunnel Grinder, and Jessica's Will. Then you can generate all the mana, you can make them draw all the cards, and you have a solid way to not only generate pseudo infinite mana, but you have a solid way to keep fueling your graveyard, making sure you can keep using that escape cost with the Underworld Breach. Then you can win with something like, I don't know, a Panharmonicon into an Astral Dragon with the Tear of the Peaks on the battlefield. That'll definitely get you there. Or if you want to get jankier, we can use Unctus, Grinding Station, and then Baylor to just go ahead and cast Baylor, sack Baylor. All you need to do is make sure in between casting the Baylor, you're casting another artifact. That way we can untap our Grinding Station. And again, make sure you are turning Baylor into an artifact creature using Unctus, and boom, we've killed everybody because we've probably put 20 cards in their hand using Windfall and the Brass's Tunnel Grinder thing by now. Again, that's super inefficient, but I think it's just kind of funny. Scrap Mastery also seems pretty solid in this deck. We have a lot of ways to fill our graveyard. Maybe they mass board wipe, then we just bring all of the artifacts in our graveyard back to the battlefield and their board wipe did nothing. Pretty solid. Plus, 9 times out of 10, Scraps Mastery doesn't help our opponents out very much. Moving on to ramp, we have Slow Bad. Remember, whenever we create a token copy of something, the copy keeps the CMC. So now we sacrifice it and generate a ton of mana with Slow Bad. Arcane Signet, Mind Stone, Izzet Signet, and Talisman of Creativity. Just some solid, very efficient mana rocks. Gilded Lotus, Worn Power Stone, Thran Dynamo for our more explosive mana rocks. And then we have Soul Ring. Moving on, we have our interaction with Arcane Denial, Swan Song, and An Offer You Can't Refuse. Resculpt is also pretty solid here. Exile effects are becoming more and more important, especially with all of the indestructible things they've been printing recently. Chaos Warp is going to be solid, get rid of any problem, and then, you know, they get to do the whole shuffle thing. Blasphemous Act is pretty good here because it's 1 mana wipe the board, and then we do have Devastation Tide for those other non-creature strategies that we need to stop. That's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. This girl's incredibly insane. Not only do you have a value engine tacked onto a commander, she gives you a solid way to end the game very quickly and out of nowhere, which can really catch your opponents off guard. She really has all the makings of a very powerful commander. Last but not least, I would like to thank my patrons, especially my high contributing ones, Newsome, Chicken Salad, and Excessum. You guys are the reason this channel keeps going. I also appreciate all my other patrons that vote weekly on a deck tech that we cover on the channel. So if you want to become a part of that, become a patron. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.